Hello. The title of this podcast is Being Happy and Peaceful, or we could call it Being Joyful and Peaceful is an Inside Job. When I think about that topic or that title, I immediately start to reflect on how much joy that and peace that I experience every single day since I began doing the practice. It's just absolutely tremendous. Uh, it would be easy to assume that I either don't have challenges or I ignore them or I'm not keeping it real with life. But that's not the case. What I've become really clear on is that a lot of my problems, if not most of my suffering, is related to this narrative that I create about certain situations, whether it's regarding how people need to act or behave or how life should show up. Like all of that, as soon as it happens, I have a narrative about it. And then what I choose to do with that narrative, whether I choose to take it on and identify with it, or if I choose to lean back and let it pass by like a floating cloud. Whatever that choice is going to determine whether or not I have a good experience the rest of the way of that present moment, or whether I have a negative experience that's filled with suffering. And what I made a choice is that I want to have a lot more joyful experiences than the suffering part. So I have begun my day a certain way for a lot of years now so that I am able to increase the number of those days that are spent experiencing a lot of joy and peace. Now, doing that is completely an inside job because externally, I have control over nothing, like a no one. I can fool myself into thinking that I do, but I don't. And because I don't, having that realize that knowledge, that wisdom, I am much more efficient and effective with how I spend my time. So I spend little to no time ruminating or being anxious or worrying. I spend no time worrying. And since doing the practice, I spend hardly any time complaining either or wishing things were different, which is all a waste of time and energy, and it just causes suffering. So having that realization has really made a difference because I focus all my energy on the inside, like it's an inside job. And my performance of the 10 to 15 minute practice that I do every day is not perfunctory. Instead, it's performative, which means that as I go through those exercises, those 5 exercises, which are gratitude, reading a page out of a book, doing some stretching, listening to a faith-based or a podcast that helps cultivate and inspire kindness and inclusion and compassion and gratitude. In doing that, it sets me up for the rest of the day. Now, that part of the practice when you first start is often perfunctory. You're just going through a checklist and hopefully some good things will happen. And there's magic that happens. Now, how do you sustain the magic? The way that I've learned to sustain the magic of that, or the power of that intervention is by every time something goes wrong, and there is no right or wrong in an absolute sense, but every time something goes wrong that my mind tells me that's wrong, it shouldn't happen. I can't believe people are doing this. I can't believe this is occurring. I don't like this. Whenever that starts, then that becomes where my practice is applied. Somebody says something that I don't like, or I will hear somebody talking about me, or it comes back, as secondhand information. I can get involved with that. I can become offended by it, or I can choose not to. That's where you apply the practice. You're with people that don't treat you in a way that you think you should be treated, or they're not considerate. You can get involved with that if you want, or you can choose not to get involved with it. And when I say get involved with it, what I mean is you can choose not to be so identified with it that it impacts how you experience the present moment and causes you to judge the person, because that only causes suffering for you and a lot of times suffering for other people. Now, that's not to mean that you don't take action. You can definitely take action, but the action that you take is informed by you being peaceful. It's informed with your the whole background and space in which you are moving through life is informed by gratitude, humility, kindness. And so the way that you would respond to a situation that requires action is completely different than the way you would do so if you were unconscious, if you weren't informed by those things, or how somebody else may do it because they would be reacting based on the narrative, based on the emotions. That's why it's an inside job. Of all the things that I have the opportunity to do, this is the most important. This is foundational for me. And so I make it the most important thing. You can say to me, well, my family is the most important thing. If you want to maximize your experience, your family, how you care for them, how you give to them, all those things, make your inside job the most important thing you do. Think of this. Think of someone in your life, and perhaps it was your parent, who they could have shown up for you better, more loving, more supportive, whatever the case may have been, more nurturing. So consider that, right? Or it could have been a significant other or former spouse or friend, coworker, boss, you name it, people in society, a neighbor, whoever, they could have shown it better. Do you wish that they were doing something like an inside job on working on all those things that are in the way of them being their best self and being a contribution to all of humanity, not just a few people that think like you do, but all of humanity? I certainly wish that would have been the case for my stepfather. So if I wish that was the case for him, why don't I make that be the gift that I give the world, my neighbors, and myself? Why not do that? Like, that's what I'm doing. So it's an inside job, I think, that we can all do. And in the beginning, it seems effortful. And the reason it seems effortful, because for me, there was a lot of like bad habits and unconscious behavior that I had to unwind. But once I made that non-negotiable commitment that this is what I was going to do for as long as it takes to experience peace and joy on a regular basis, it became like, why wouldn't I do that? Like, of course. I mean, think of all the things that you've committed to, right? That if you chose to make working on anything, but working first on yourself, an inside job, if you made that the priority, how much easier would life be? I would love to hear from people that are actually doing a well-being practice that's rooted in love and treating everybody with compassion, humility, and gratitude and kindness. I'd be very interested in those people who do that daily. And not that they go through steps, that they only go through steps to do it, but they live it. Like, people feel it. I would love to see and hear them say, what was life like before they start to do this inside job? And what is life like now for them? Are the things that would bother them before and make work more of a chore instead of this amazing opportunity to lend your talents and creativity in your efforts to a noble cause? Was it easier before it was an inside job for you, or is it easier now? Without having their feedback, I would probably say, if they're like me, it was more challenging before. And the reason it was more challenging before, because what you were doing, at least what I was doing, was an impossible task. And I was not wise to how impossible it was. And what was that task? Instead of making being happy and being joyful and peaceful an inside job, I was making it an outside job, meaning that I was trying to manipulate the world and people, or rearrange them, or they should be this way. I was trying to do that with the external world, people outside of myself. I can't even control my mind, let alone controlling somebody else. So that's why it is an impossible task to do. And by being trapped in that loop, by being trapped in that matrix, what ends up happening is you work much harder than you do without any return. And how do you know it's no return? How much has worrying solved one problem that you've had? Take your time, think about it. How has being anxious about any situation made it a easier task to accomplish? How's it helped? It hasn't. What about losing sleep with obsessive thinking about this and what they might say or what may happen? And how's that created more peace in your life for yourself or for others? I'm waiting. Take your time. Think about it. It hasn't. So trying to manipulate the world or trying to control people or convince them and persuade them, whatever the case may be, or trying to do something else, that it's a waste of energy and time. It produces no outcome. Now, you can still do those things and your behavior can be influenced by worry and anxiousness and things like that. But do you think the choices that you make and the actions that you take based on that kind of internal activity produces a better outcome, a better result than had you done it coming from a peaceful place? And I argue that when you worry and carry on and be anxious, and in my case, complain and go on, internal and sometimes external rants about why this should be different and this shouldn't be happening, am I making a positive contribution to the world that is uplifting to everyone, including myself? The answer is no. So the key to your experience of any situation, of there being even a sliver or an opening, or creating an opening for joy and peace to fuel that space, just an opening, starts with you making everything an inside job. Over the last 7 years, I've had a lot of challenges, most of which I've talked about in the podcast. And not one of those instances would have been better if I was still worrying, being obsessive in my thinking about it, ruminating, or being anxious about it, or wishing it were different. It was just been more and more suffering, and I'd have been trapped in those unproductive habits at the mercy of them for far too long. But instead, every challenge, every single one, has been this amazing opening, this opportunity to learn. And as I've gone through them, not wishing that they were different, but accepting them as they are, what it did was it allowed me to open my heart more and more and more and more, not close it. You can think of anything that has been an undesirable event. I made a commitment that I would be unconditional and being loving and kind to everybody and not having a closed heart. I was going to make it a point to keep an open heart, and this would be unconditional. Unconditional. I told this story in one of the podcasts before, but in a documentary about the Chicago Bulls, the basketball team, Michael Jordan comes to North Carolina as a freshman, and it's clear of how talented he is. So he goes to the assistant coach and says, listen, I want to be the most talented person, the best athlete, the best basketball player that's ever played at the University of North Carolina. And he said, that's my goal. So tell me what I want to do. The coach said, well, you got to work harder. He said, what are you talking about? I am working hard. I work harder than anybody else. I get here early. I work harder than anybody else. And the coach says, oh, excuse me. I thought you said you want to be the best player in North Carolina history. And that's what I say to myself. Every time something happens that's not to my liking, and I want to lose this space that I'm in, I want to lose being peaceful. I want to react. Every time that happens, an event happens, that voice comes up and tells me, this is different. You need to handle this. You need to every time that happens, I say to myself, hold on a second. I thought you said you wanted to be the most kind, loving, open-hearted person that you could possibly be. It's like that applies to this moment too. Not just the moments that are easy and a little challenging, but even the ones that are really big, that are really challenging. It applies there too. And because I've been unconditional with that commitment, it's paid incredible dividends. I continue to expand my capacity to be loving and kind, making no exceptions of how life or people show up. So I can only tell you, for those of you that are making uh, being joyful and happy and peaceful an inside job, nice work. Keep it up. For those who aren't doing it, consider doing it, because life will be much better for you and for others. So again, make being happy, joyful, and peaceful a inside job.